Hello everyone, it's Suryan here, and I'm coming back here with another KOF 15 video. This time I just want to go over my impressions and my general experience, the time that I had with the open beta test that happened a little more than a week ago. Sorry for the delay on this, it's just that yeah, I was working on the system breakdown for KOF 15. The playlist is up, you're more than welcome to check that out if you want to get into the game. And yeah, just generally life as well, so that sort of slowed me down. But without further ado, we'll get into my experience and point out some things that I noticed. So to start with this beta, there was an important piece of info that needed to be factored in. What was informed to us was that a PS Plus subscription would not be needed to take part in the open beta test. But every time I tried to get in, what inadvertently happened would be that I would still be forced to get into PS Plus, so I had to bite the bullet, and this is what happened. Just a second, yeah? Just a quick second. I do feel that this was unacceptable, and it was information that we were just misled, to be honest. And I feel like this is something that neither SNK nor Sony has corrected since the beta has closed. Maybe some apology must have been issued, but quite frankly, I feel like this was unacceptable on quite a number of fronts. But the other thing that was also perplexing about this was that generally for PS Plus, they would gate you from playing online modes. So if you wanted to play online, that's when the PS Plus would come into the picture. But in this instance, I couldn't even play any of the offline modes without a PS Plus activated. So this was just bizarre and quite frankly, just unacceptable on a few levels. And I hope that if there was a new if there is another beta in the works, that SNK and or Sony get this addressed sooner rather than later. Once I did get in though, I was pleasantly surprised, and I really like the UI and the general feel that they're going for with the presentation of King of Fighters 15. When I booted up the game, I went into the tutorial just to get a feel for it, just to see if there's any new mechanic or anything I might have missed. And as soon as I opened it up, it was nice to see that in-game it definitely looks better than KOF 14, which I suppose goes without saying. But I like that the art direction of the game stands out a lot more, and I like that they're going into it, and I think it works very well, and it works well with the backgrounds, and the characters stand out sufficiently, and even all the stages that they have going on as well. Those things stand out very well, and everything sounds very good as well. The music is, as is the case with a lot of SNK games, it's very top-notch, very high-quality music. And it's music that I'm definitely a fan of, and this was no exception. After I'd settled everything in the tutorial, which is what I first started with upon booting up the game, I did try out the training mode in this game, and what I noticed when I turned on the attack display was something that I don't think I've seen in the other KOF games before, is that they had a frame advantage and disadvantage portion, where if it was plus, it was a lot of block stun. Or in the opposite end of that spectrum, it could also mean that the move was punishable, and if you would see a plus icon or a minus icon, it would indicate some frame advantage, some frame disadvantage. And I'm like that it's there, although I don't really know what's stopping SNK from actually including an actual number that's tied to the frames. But I do think this is definitely better than nothing, and I like that it's there to begin with, and it's a step up from the previous game. So I do find this a welcome change in my eyes. Now, as far as playing the game itself, there are a couple of things I want to bring up, but I think chief among them, and to me this is possibly the most perplexing thing, and I suppose some other people would agree with me on this, but the red kick input, and the same for Dolores, the nest move, the one where she grabs you out of the air. Typically red kick is a reverse DP, so it'll be back, down, down, back. But in this game it's back, quarter circle back, At first I thought, okay, maybe this is something that, I could look past, maybe I can just get used to it. But I could not get used to this, and this just got very annoying for me, and it was just not a pleasant experience. And every time I wanted to do a red kick, I was very conscious of it, and that's not how you want to go about your playing experience in a game this fast paced. So that is very perplexing. I don't really know why SNK have opted to go for that, and I do hope they reverted to an actual reverse DP input when the game does actually drop. I don't know if I'm in the minority in this or if there was something I'm missing, but I do feel like, granted this only took a little bit of an adjustment, but KOF 15's rooms, the lobby system, while it works and I think it does the job, I do feel like it's a step down from what KOF 14 was, although again I could be missing something, but it does feel much more limited and not so intuitive compared to 14. And I don't really know what the reasoning is for going with this sort of room. It just seemed a lot more limited. Like in 14 you could set up a tournament mode, you could set up a series mode, and there's probably some other modes that are missing. All you have to do is just set up the room, and you could have multiple sort of mini rooms within that room, and each room could have its own game mode. And I could be missing something, but that certainly wasn't what was possible when I played 15. So yeah, I do hope that the lobby system is going to be more closely resembling what it is in KOF 14. And I understand that it might not be something that, it might not be a feature that they could feature in the beta, since it is a much more truncated, a lot more simplified version of the final release. But yeah, I was hoping that we'd get something a lot closer to a 14 than what it is in 15. Not that it's bad, but I do see it as a step down unless I am missing something. Now when it came to casual matches though, yeah, the method they opted for to find matches, it seems, was to get into the casual match menu and then search for the match from there basically. And you also had to set up your team beforehand. You couldn't select casual match and then select your characters once you clicked casual match. So I found that there were a lot of steps, there were a lot of hoops in that sense. And then once you do select it, you're sort of stuck with no option but to just wait for an opponent to be available for a casual match. Now I get that this is functional and it gets the job done, but I do feel this is maybe a tiny bit archaic for my liking. I would have preferred if we could have used the offline modes like the training mode or the tutorial mode, and just left the search going while we were using those offline modes. I think this is common practice for a game like Street Fighter V or Fantasy Strike. But yeah, I do feel like, granted I do understand this is a beta and you might not have all these features put in place just yet, but I do find that it is puzzling that it was not a feature that they would implement to at least test that and see whether that was going to work. And yeah, it was just one of those things where it was not fun, having to sit there and wait for a match. Granted, I didn't have to wait very long, so that was good, but ideally I wouldn't want to wait for a match. I'd rather be doing something else instead of just waiting for a match, ideally. So when it came to playing matches and testing out the netcode, the way I'd put it is I had a mixed experience, so to say. What I will say is that when the matches were good, they were very good, and the match that you're seeing right now is against a friend of mine who was on my stream, Sursa. He's an experienced KOF 14 player, and I had a lot of fun with our games. He's based in the US and I'm based in Malaysia, and the first few matches were rough, admittedly, but after a while things seemed to settle down. That or some variant of one-sided rollback probably kicked in, but after the first few matches I had a lot of fun and the matches were smooth, and Zursa didn't really seem to mind on his end as we were playing. And yeah, once again, this was a connection all the way from US to Malaysia, and yeah, it felt basically like offline, which was pretty good. So yeah, I had no complaints there. The other match worth bringing up is this match right here, where I went against a player who I'm guessing it's from Brazil, and from the looks of it, the match seems pretty smooth. All the way from Brazil to Malaysia, and I can't quite complain about this one. So, in that sense, yeah, things seem to hold up quite well. On the other end of the spectrum, though, what I would also experience is sometimes, rollback would occur where I'd hit the opponent, but all of a sudden it'd end up blocking my hit, or I'd kill off my opponent, and it turns out they were still very much alive. So, those kinds of instances happen, but fortunately, I was never teleporting or jerking violently across the screen when all of these things are happening. This definitely wasn't like a Street Fighter V experience. So at least that has that going for it. Beyond just the occasional teleport and the occasional jerkiness of the rollback, what I did strangely experience was actual delay, where rollback strangely didn't kick into effect. It was one of those things where I would press a button and quite literally anywhere from half a second to 2 seconds later, only then would it actually show up on my screen. So I would tap crouch Bs and only see it like significantly later on screen. And then there were some other things like one-sided rollback and like the audio would distort. Those felt weird, but even when the audio was distorting, the match for the most part still held up okay. So yeah, I'm surprised that that's the way it worked out. But yeah, the delay issue especially was quite weird, and I really hope that's not something that I am on the receiving end of when I do play the game again. The biggest issue that I had with the netcode, however, was how it relayed the information, how it told you the status of the connection is with the opponent. So in the case of my friend Sursa and that Brazilian player, the match connection was fine, but they seemed to show that there were 1-bar connections. Now I'm also showing this connection with this match with my friend over here, Lucifer, or you may know him as Shafiq. We live basically like a 5-minute drive away from each other, and he's still more or less in my neighborhood, my sort of town. And quite frankly, so he shows up as a level 5 on my PS4, and I show up as like a level 2 strangely, whereas Sursa and the Brazilian guy show up as a level 1. And quite frankly, I don't quite understand the how these bars work and how they sort of relay the information to you. Because quite frankly, I couldn't really tell the difference between the two. So it is a bit awkward that it shows up as a level 1, so when I had a level 4 match, I couldn't quite tell the difference between some of the good level 1s that I've had, and sometimes I'd have a level 2 or level 3 connection, and it just wouldn't hold up nearly as well as the level 1 connections, or those level 1 connections that I had. So there's a lot of inconsistency, and the connection status just seems to lie almost. So I just hope that that in particular gets addressed. If they could show the actual ping. I get that the levels are supposed to be indicative of the ping between you and the opponent, but I suppose that's also part of the issue. If I'm not mistaken, they show you that each band of what the level 1 and level 2 or level 3 is, and I think each variance or each band for each level, I think, is maybe a bit too small to actually gauge how good or how bad the connection is. And maybe if they reassess that, I think we may be in a better position. But for right now, if they I think the major thing would be to handle the one-sided rollback, handle the delay that I was experiencing, where rollback strangely didn't come into effect, and just making sure that the information that's relayed, especially about connection, is more transparent, and I think we'll be in a better position, because everything seems to be headed in the right direction. Now it's a matter of just touching up so that these other issues aren't really a factor when the game comes out. Now, as far as playing the game itself, I do realize a lot of people are sort of bringing up comparisons to KOF 14. While I do think there are elements of 14 in this game, I do feel that the overlap is kind of minimal in my eye. The way I like to see this game, at least from the time I played it, is I think something closer to like a KOF 98 with EX moves. Also, the other thing is because 14 was very much about you utilizing max mode and getting the most from max mode, and given that it's a 2-bar prerequisite in this game, and especially since your first character is only going to get maybe 2 EX moves if you're lucky, so you're only really going to get 1 bar's worth of damage potential from something that costs 2 bars. So the potential for max mode in this game definitely has sort of taken a dip, but it's in favor of you using raw EX moves and you cancelling into your supers the way it was done in something like KOF 98. Of course, now you can cancel that into supers and you do EX moves and stuff, so it is a tiny bit different. But yeah, I don't think it's as close to 14 just because the max mode is definitely downplayed in this game, at least in the time that I was playing. And maybe there might be some potential for it when we sink more time into it. But for right now, I think in my eye it's closer to something like a 98 with EX moves. Now, I said that max mode in this game is downplayed because of the 2-bar requisite, and I know people are going to bring up that you can quick max and you can go into like level 1, level 2, level 3, because that's the raw max mode, and I feel like the raw max mode, its potential doesn't seem particularly practical in my eye. I'm sure that situations are gonna start popping up and stuff, and like maybe you could use like a raw max mode if you're trying to punish a DP or something, but I feel like the likelihood of A, popping a raw max mode, and B, actually landing a hit on someone and getting that kind of damage, I think the chances of that happening are so minimal that I don't really see it being something to take into account in the wider scope of how the game is played. One thing I'd like to bring up as well is this win screen over here. You will have to listen to the entire line of dialogue, wait for it to finish, and only then can you choose an option from the menu. Now, this is cool like the first couple of times you listen to it, but given that it's 8 characters only, it starts to waste a lot of time and it gets old very quickly, and I hope that by the time the game actually comes out, we can actually skip this bit of dialogue quicker, because yeah, it did waste a lot of time in my eye. I'll also go over the characters that I played and just give a rough impression. I'm by no means gonna go over tier lists or give any indication of how good or how bad a character is, but just a general sort of feel for them and what I think and what I have played. One thing I will bring up is that I didn't really get to play the Orochi team, but I did get to play against them, and I'll just give a rough sort of where my head is at with those characters and such. To start off, I'll go over the character that I'm most familiar with, and I'll go down the familiarity from there. So I'll start with Iori first, just because he's the character that I played the most from KOF 14, and he happens to be available in this beta. And quite frankly, he's still a pretty solid character, and he's still pretty good. There are some minor changes that I noticed with him. Namely that his standing lead does feel a tiny bit slower. It definitely is not as snappy, it's not as quick and as responsive as the way it is in 14. So that's one. The other thing that I noticed as well is that his taco didn't seem to guarantee a lot of hit stun and block stun, so it was hard to sort of get taco into close C, forward A type stuff. But otherwise, he's still very much a strong character. He's still going to be a force to be reckoned with, and he's still going to be a very good character regardless. Now, the other character that I played is Kyo. If I were to compare him to how he is in 14, quite frankly, I'd say, of the 3 characters that came from 14, he's probably the one that's changed the least. Like, if you played him in 14, I think he's gonna fit in this game like very seamlessly. Granted, he's got some extra strings and some extra changes in his rekas, but outside of that, he's pretty much exactly the same. I couldn't really quite tell the difference between Kyo in this in 15 and the way he is in 14. So if you played him in 14, I think you'll feel right at home with the way he is in 15. Now, admittedly, the time that I had playing Shune in 14 was extremely limited, but I did have a general grasp of how he played. So coming into 15, I felt that he was probably the character that had the most amount of change coming from 14. For starters, his aerial quarter circle forward punch, the blue wing, no longer has the juggle state, so you can't link that into his phantom punch, the horizontal phantom punch. And the other thing that I noticed is that none of his dragon punches were invincible anymore. So that was quite an adjustment. And I think him compared to Iori and Q have probably seen the biggest amount of change. And I suppose it's all right. He has now access to EX moves. So speaking of EX moves, what was also interesting is that his EX Phantom Punch no longer has that wall bounce property. So yeah, I feel like he's probably seen the biggest amount of change coming from 14, which I suppose is fair considering the way he was in 14. In my eyes at least, I do think Shune is a well-designed character, all in all. We can't really say the same for how he looks and all that stuff, but I do think he's a well-designed character. The only gripe that I might have had in 14 is he probably might have done a bit too much damage for my liking. So I think in this instance, that seems to be addressed partially, or maybe for now, there could be ways that he might probably do the damage that we know he's going to do, but he definitely feels different than the way I remembered him in 14. And yes, Shune is still a very solid character, and he's as solid as he was in 14. It's just that, he feels different. But he's still more or less going to play the same, and I think he's more or less still going to be as good as he was in 14. On the second day, I tried Chizuru, Dolores, and Shune. With Chizuru especially, I find her a very interesting character, and I did play her a tiny bit in 98 just to sort of get a feel for when she was available for this game. And she's more or less the same as she was in 98. Maybe not 98 vanilla, I hear she was pretty much broken in that game. But I played 98 UM, and she's more or less the same the way she was in that game. Very interesting character, but I also do feel like she's one of those characters that could give a lot of new players problems. Like, this is one issue that I came across, is when she would do her dragon punch. You might have just seen it there. It was tough to sort of tell whether she was gonna do whether she did the light one or the heavy one. Sorry. Where I'm trying to get at with this is that if she did the light one, she would stay on the ground. If she did the heavy one, she would actually fly up. So yeah, when she would do either the light or the heavy DP, I wasn't quite sure whether to punish Chizuru or whether to punish the clone. That was very difficult for me to tell. And when the game does come out, I have every intention of labbing that particular situation, because I do see it being a problem for not just myself, but I think a lot of players that may not necessarily be used to fighting against Chizuru. Now for Dolores, on the other hand, she was definitely very interesting, and I like the design and how she plays and stuff, but maybe how she plays might be a bit of a stretch. I think the mechanics and all that are interesting, but as far as her play style and all that, I don't quite think it gelled with mine personally. There was just a lot to sort of figure out, but I see her very similar to a character like Kanra from Killer Instinct. Everything's about spacing and positioning. She's got a positional, proximity kind of command grab, which is pretty cool. But it's just that it's one of those things where, like, I think she's one of those characters that takes time to get good with. She's going to be one of those characters where you will need the time to sort of figure out what's going to work with her and what won't. And 2 days is just not enough to sort of get the feel, but definitely an interesting character regardless. Now on to characters that I'm not nearly as familiar with. Let's start off with Yashiro. The way I felt about him is that, my god, this guy has got normals for days, especially like his jump CD, his jump D. I felt they were very difficult to sort of work around. And yeah, his sweep is also quite annoying, if I do say so myself. But one thing that stood out to me about Yashiro, I just felt that he does a lot of damage without having to rely on a lot of resources. Like, I think for half a bar or even 1 bar, he's able to do just like 50% or if not more, and sometimes these lead into, you know, hard knockdowns and stuff. Like, if you look at this combo right here, he did 1 Shatter Strike, got the half bar back, spent the other half, and that was it. It was like 40% of my health was gone. Like, I think he probably does a bit too much damage for my liking, but there's a good chance maybe these sort of things will be adjusted moving forward or when the game does come out. But yeah, that's my sort of long and short of what I think of Yashiro at the moment. Now, as far as Shermy goes, yeah, I don't fully know a whole lot about her. I do know she has a lot of, you know, throws, she has a lot of grappling moves, and she has 4 C's to her, thick to her. It's one of those things where, like, you know, from the little I played, and I don't know if I was necessarily, you know, whether it was the difference in player levels and stuff, but it almost felt like, you know, for her to be scary, she had to take a lot of risks. And, you know, if she has to, like, that's the only time where once she actually makes that risk, that's when things start spiraling out of your control. But yeah, if she doesn't take that risk, you know, on the surface at least, it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot to be afraid about. But again, I could be missing something. It's just a quick impression of, you know, what I experienced going against Shermy, which wasn't a lot in fairness. Now on to Chris, Christopher, or Pro Chris as Lord Ignan Rizzi calls him. You know, I was quite afraid of this character, especially when I looked at the trailer, just because there was no way I was going to be able to block everything that he was going to do. Like, it just looked like he could mix you up till you go blue in the face, and I knew I wasn't going to be prepared if that happened to me. Like, I was very much expecting to just get mixed up beyond understanding. And quite frankly, when I did play the beta, it barely ever happened. So it kind of suggests that, like, if a Chris is gonna mix you up on that level, they probably have to know what they're doing, and maybe not a lot of people had much of an idea of how to sort of be scary with Chris. So I sort of had a bit of reprieve in that sense when I played the beta, but I don't think that's going to change the fact that he's probably still going to be quite scary for those that haven't labbed the matchup and aren't quite sure of what to do, and, you know, aren't quite aware of his options. So yeah, he's the threat. He's still going to be a threat. It's just that I kind of got lucky and I got away with it in a sense that the people that I played against didn't really know how to instill the fear, the Chris. And those were my impressions of the King of Fighters 15 open beta test that happened a little more than a week ago. Lots of ups and lots of downs. I'm just hoping that when another beta test comes out, that the ups will be further upped and the downs are sort of lessened or removed entirely, ideally. But yeah, I'm hopeful for what comes next with the King of Fighters 15. And until then, if you have any other questions or if there's anything else you want to bring up, feel free to put it down in the comments. If you like the KOF 15 content, if you want to see more, feel free to like and subscribe. But until then, I shall see you guys next time. Do have a nice day. Take care.